Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 5 Minutes PM podcast. Today, I'd like to discuss with you an email message that I received a couple of weeks ago asking about the difference between the two types of float, the two types of slack that I have in the project, the free float and the total float. This is an extremely important concept to schedule management. If you remember, a few weeks ago, I published a podcast about the critical path concept. And the critical path shows all the tasks with the lower float. Usually, float equals to 0, so no float. And the other tasks that are not in the critical path, they have at least some float, some fluctuations. What do I mean by that? That these tasks, they can be postponed or delayed a little bit without damaging or other tasks or damaging the final project deadline. And this will be the frame for the concept of free slack and total slack. What is a free slack? It's the float that I have. Let's suppose that I'm a task. So it's the float that I have. So the delay that I have that will not damage anybody. No other task. The critical and the non-critical task. So let's do a comparison with money. It's the money that I have in my pocket that belongs to me. If, let's suppose, I have 2 days of float. What do I mean by that? Is that I can have up to 2 days of delay without damaging anybody. This is the free float, is the float that I have. And what is the concept of the total float or total slack? Is the float that I have plus all the floats that my successors have, that only one aspect must be respected. I cannot delay the final project date, but I can delay every task in the project, but the critical tasks. So let's suppose I'm task A and you are task B. I have 2 days of free float. What do I mean by that? I can delay my task up to 2 days without any damage to anybody. And you are my successor and you have also 3 days. I have a float of 3 days. So you can delay your task up to 3 days. But you depend on the projects that I will produce on task A. And what is my total float? My total float is 2 plus 3. It's my float and your float. So I can delay my project up to 5 days. And with that, I will not damage the project. What I will damage? I will damage you and your task. And you will become critical because of these 3 days. So look the difference. The free float is the float that belongs to me. And the total float is the float that belongs to me plus the float that belongs to other tasks in the future that are linked to my task. And for me, this is my own concept. For me, the more trustable float is your free float. I don't think it's a good option to use the float of other people. It's good to know that you have this, like the safety. But if you use this, you will be damaging future work. Imagine again the money. I have $2 in my pocket and my brother has $3. And let's suppose that I take my $2 and I go also to my brother's pocket and pick up $3. My family will not go to bankruptcy, but I'm damaging future reserves, future float. So this is the important aspect of understanding what is free float and what is total float or total slack. And how do we calculate that? Most of the software will do this easily. But if you need to do this by hand, it's just the same process of doing the critical path. You have the forward pass and the backward pass. where you go adding and then subtracting the durations up to find the critical path. The critical path is the path where the forward pass will be the same of the backward pass. And the float, the total float, is very easy to calculate. It's just look the backward and subtract it to the forward pass. So let's suppose that early start of my task is 10 and the late start of my task is 12. So I have 2 days of float, 12 less 10. And the free, this is the total float. And the free float, just look to the successor. So the early start of my successor is on 14th. And the early finish of the predecessor is 12. So 14 less 12, I have 2 days of free float that belongs to me and nobody else. So it's my money, it's my time. And the total float, it's my time plus other time. So let's suppose that now, giving again the example of the money, let's suppose that I don't have any cash in my pocket, but my brother is my successor. He has $5. And then I go shopping and spend $5. I'm not making my family go to bankruptcy, but I'm taking all the savings of my brother. So this concept is such an important concept to do schedule management. So free float, the float that belongs to me. Total float, the float that belongs to me, plus the float that belongs to someone else. The only prerequisite for this total float is I cannot delay the project. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you very much and see you next week with another 5 Minutes PM podcast. Bye.